Welcome to another episode of Hidden Heritage, where we follow the breadcrumbs to discover more evidence of who were the only American Indians that inhabited the Americas, and that are still here to this day. Now, before we dive into the rabbit hole of truth, if you are new to the channel, please like, share, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below, and don't forget to turn on post notifications so you'll be informed about our next upcoming episode. If you are already subscribed, welcome back to the channel, and thank you once again for your unwavering support. Please continue to like, comment, and share so more people can witness the truth. Let's dive in. And just a quick welcome to our new members. We thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. How to change your status back to American Indian. Today's video will cover that extensive. As you can see before you, we have a book from the 1800s, for example, of Americans called Africans, and you see what the American looks like. All right, so let's get a closer look. Examine her facial features, phenotype, her hair texture, all right, skin complexion. You see the gold bracelet around her arm, right? You see down here, it looks like either her feather headdress was laid down here, and you see the pearls. All right, so if anyone can make out what these other items are, let us know, or take a guess. But as you can see, this is just one example of them reclassifying us as something else, whether African, or black, or Negro, or mulatto, or color. All right, to remove us from the land, and they work themselves in, or they find replacements to put us in. All right, so let's get another example up and running. Also here, we have Brethren by Nature, New England Indians, colonists, and the origins of American slavery, not African slavery. And then we read down here, there were many paths to enslavement, capture, and raids was but one path within European colonies, where natives lived under difficult circumstances. They could be enslaved. Only one group was enslaved in America through a variety of means. Mission Indians in Florida, the Southwest, and elsewhere in the Spanish Empire often were forced to work against their will with little or no monetary compensation. In New England, courts forced Dutch to hijack found guilty of minor crimes into a lifetime of servitude. There's only one group of people in the Americas that had to deal with that. Natives could also be enslaved for debt or reclassified as Africans. Okay, so once you see the word reclassified, you know, they're not talking about Native Americans. Okay, because there's no Native Americans reclassified as a Negro, or black, or, right here, as an African, right? Because we have people. There was only one group of people in the entire world who's literally reclassified as an African American, or an Afro-Indigenous, or Afro-Caribbean, one group. So once you put the pieces together and you see the Indians was reclassified as Africans, okay, when they call Americans, called Africans. All right, so we're going to go over some steps for how to change your status back to American Indian for the folks in the USA, for the folks in North America, which encompasses the USA. In Canada, as well, we can follow the same rules as the people in the USA. There are different rules in South America, for instance, in Brazil, Peru, Mexico. And also, we have for the people in the West Indies, we have steps for them as well. And last, but not least, we have people in Europe or the United Kingdom. We have steps for you guys as well that you can take a look at and see if you guys can get your Indigenous status or American Indian status updated in the country, your specific country you are in. Let's take a look. A sneak peek into our next upcoming video directly after this one. We have right here, we have plenty of these. It says work as also as the plantation system group in South Carolina. Governor Allure employed some of his Indian slaves in tilling his fields. So, we have 4 markers right here in this small passage. And we have so much more. You're going to want to stay tuned for the next video. But we got plantation, South Carolina, Indian slaves, and tilling the fields. That's like 5 markers, 6 markers right here. All right, so just be mindful and be ready to be amazed. This is why we have to change our status back. First up, how to change your status back to American Indian in the USA. If you wish to change your official status to American Indian in the USA, here are the general steps to consider. Number 1. Trace your ancestry. Research your family history to establish your American Indian lineage. This may involve reviewing family records, birth certificates, census records, or oral histories. So, let's stop and let us show you the website for to change your birth certificate. All right, so here is the website. It's called vitalcheck.com. This is the spelling, and this is the website. You can order birth certificates, death certificates, divorce certificates, marriage certificates, and make sure your birth certificates has you listed as an American Indian. You are going to need to do this for your death certificates as well. Of course, take care of yours first and foremost, but anyone alive or not alive should not be listed as a Negro or black or colored or African American. All right, those terms are null and void. All right, we're going to put a video at the end screen, and it's going to say, "We are not black." All right, it's going to be really noticeable on the end screen. And we're going to have another video to caveat that, because we're going to go look at the standard form 181 coming up next. After we read the steps you need to take for the people in the USA to change their erroneous status of African American, or black, or Negro, or colored back to American Indian. You're going to need to look at the video called "This is Why We Are American Indians," because it's going to cover the form extensively, word for word, bar for bar. So we don't have to break it down here too much. We're just going to cover the steps for the folks in USA, Canada, West Indies, South America, Europe, and the United Kingdom, because we have viewers in those places as well. And they are needing to know the steps in their specific area, especially the folks from the United Kingdom. Mostly came from the West Indies, so they're going to need to know how to do it in the West Indies. If they have family still down there, or the folks in the UK, they live there, they're going to need to know how to do it in the UK as well. All right, so if you haven't done so already, please give the video a quick like and subscribe so we can help the algorithm push the information out to the people that need to see it. All right, so we're moving on for the folks in the USA. Say, research your family history to establish your American Indian lineage. This may involve reviewing family records, birth certificates, census records, or histories. Number 2, verify tribal connection. If you have it, if not, it is completely fine because we fall under the banner because of the paper genocide and reclassification and denying of our American Indian identities from here until hundreds of years ago. We fall under the banner of community attachment. We're going to go over that as well. And we made a whole entire video labeled, "This is Why We Are American Indians." All right, but we're just going to read a little bit of it. Once we get to the standard form 181 for our folks in the USA, identify the specific tribe your ancestors were affiliated with. This comes with genealogy. But again, if you don't have that, because they suppress our information, and they make us pay for our genealogy, and pay other people that has nothing to do with us, and then they hide it. And anyway, yeah, so we're just going to skip over that one actually. That's just you can pause to read, but we're going to skip over that, because normally that doesn't apply to us because the level of suppression and reclassification and paper genocide is just insane. But get a genealogist who would help you. All right, so provide documentation. Let's see if that pertains. Tribes usually require document. Okay, all right. So again, this birth certificate, you're going to have to change that because you probably won't have anything linking to that American Indian identity for your ancestors. But the census might. All right. So let's go here. You can apply for tribal membership if you'd like. Obtain a certificate of degree of Indian blood. Sometimes each tribe is very specific to their own blood, which doesn't pertain to us because they don't look nothing like us. All right, but we have options. Okay, I'll say number 7. Once recognized as an American Indian, you can update your racial or ethnic designation with various agencies, such as a Social Security Administration, state agencies for driver's license or ID cards, educational institutions, or employers. Okay? And always seek legal advice if necessary. If you encounter challenges in the process, consulting with a lawyer experienced in American Indian law or tribal enrollment can be helpful. Cultural recognition, if applicable, engage with the tribe and its community to reconnect culturally, participate in events, and affirm your identity. All right. So this is what we were talking about earlier when it comes to self-identification in context, like the United States Census. You can self-identify as American Indian. Update your records where applicable, for example, educational institution or workplace, human resources systems. So let's take a look at the form. All right? So we're continuing on with the folks in the USA. We come to this form. This is a living and breathing document. So it applies as you're listening to this video. It's called the Ethnicity and Race Identification. So you come down here to American Indian. Check the box because this applies to you. All right, here's why a person having origins in any of the original peoples of North and South America, including Central America. Central America encompasses the West Indies, and who maintains tribal affiliation. Or, okay, so one or the other tribal affiliation, if you don't have that because of paper genocide and them suppressing your identity, we have community attachment, and we made an entire video explaining that word for word, bar for bar. It's going to be at the end of the video. It's going to be called "This is Why We Are American Indians," and we're going to explain some of that today, right here. Why we are American Indians, short answer, is because we cannot legally or lawfully be black. All right, so notice it says for black or African American. We're talking to the folks that call themselves Black American as well. If anyone is selecting this box, or even referring to themselves as a Black American, a black person, or black people, or African American, this applies to you. And it is impossible for anyone on planet Earth to be black, because you have to be attached to peoples. We are not individuals. We are not, as far as, there is no, what's it called? There is no I in team. Okay, so original peoples are the only people that can be indigenous to a certain place. Now, if we're talking about the Americas, the American Indian Dodge, the highlight hijack. This is not us because their Google made a very correct distinction between American Indian and Native American Indians have a Heritage Month. Native Americans have a Heritage Day. Now, no one can argue or debate that a day is the same as a month. A day is not interchangeable with a month. So the simple fact remains the truth that an American Indian is different from a Native American. All right, they are not interchangeable because a day is not the same as a month. So again, we need to be attached to peoples. We are not individuals. We are not persons. Okay, we are people that is extremely important to understand and understand what we are saying. We are not individuals. We all come from people, all right? So there's no way you can be black or Negro or colored or African American or Black American or anything other than what you see here. Okay? We don't need to list all the names of the erroneous identities that we sometimes want to feel different or cool or unique, or special right here. The truth is bone dry and boring, because you cannot alter. But if we start attaching different identities to ourselves as opposed to our people, then we become null and void, and we don't exist. So this is why you need to change your identity back to American Indian, because we are attached to original peoples of North and South America, including Central America that encompasses the West Indies. All right, it is impossible to be black. Okay. Or Negro, or colored, or African American, because you need to be attached to original peoples. There's no word for original peoples anywhere here in this black or African category. All right. You have original peoples for American Indians. Asians are attached to original peoples right here. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander are attached to original peoples. Even white people are attached to original peoples. There's no original peoples for black or African American. Can't stress that enough. All right, so we are going to leave again a video that's called "This is Why We Are American Indians," because it covers this term, a very in-depth community attachment. But every video we leave at the end screen, you need to watch those as well. It's very important because that's how you are afforded rights as an American Indian, as an original peoples, because you are recognized by the United Nations. You're recognized worldwide, internationally as Indigenous peoples, as an American Indian. So, all right, so if we come here, you see the term African American, and you notice how you would never hear someone being called an African Asian, an African European, an African Australian, an African Arab, or an African Arab, or an African Middle Eastern. You won't find any paperwork anywhere, especially if they are about to fill out a standard 181 form. A standard form 181. No one would be calling themselves an African Asian, or African European, or African Australian, or African Arab, or African Middle Eastern. Why? Because it does not make any sense. So, for the folks that like to be like, well, everyone came from Africa, but they don't call themselves African Asian, or so on and so forth. And we cannot say to ourselves that, well, we have someone that is from an African country, but he or she is white. So they're technically African American. However, if you would hand them a form today, even if you would look at the form, you would not call them an African American. And I guarantee you, they are not listed as black or African American. They are listed as white. All right, so black is not the same as white. White people on the form are a part of original peoples. Black people or African Americans or Afro people are part of an African group. You need to be attached to peoples, original peoples. You cannot be attached to an African group. Okay? It doesn't make any sense. We also have another example of things that don't make sense. Afro-Indigenous, Afro-Brazilian, Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latina, or Afro-Latino. Now those same people who are being called this nonsense, right, are not met with the same energy by calling other people that don't look like them Euro-Indigenous, Euro-Brazilian, or Asia, or Asian Indigenous. Because this does not make any sense. And if this doesn't make sense, excuse me, if this doesn't make sense, if all things are the same or equal, this Afro-Latina, or Afro-Caribbean, or Afro-Brazilian, or Afro-Indigenous also does not make any sense. You cannot be African and indigenous to Brazilian at the same time. The reason being, because the people who don't look like them do not refer to themselves as Euro-Indigenous or Euro-Brazilian, because it would sound ridiculous if all things are the same or equal. Again, Genealogy would solve all of that to stop referring to indigenous people of Mexico as Afro-Indigenous. If that was the case, then they'll still be just Africans or indigenous Mexicans, but not both, especially if you're passing a new law saying that they are Afro-Indigenous or their own group, and they've been there a long time ago before the Europeans. Okay. So stop referring to them as Afro because you're not referring to yourself. They are not referring to themselves as Euro-Indigenous. No one says that. All right. So let's dive a little bit deeper. All right. So here's more proof that that term is ridiculous, because once we ask artificial intelligence, because once we remove the bias and the human element out of simple questions, watch how they break it down. Says how to change your status back to American Indian in South America or Mexico. And we're going to just scroll through this real quick, because we spend way more time than we expected on this topic, because it sounds ridiculous to call anyone that term. And once we scroll through here, our main point is to look for anything that says anything about Afro. When you are trying to change your status back to American Indian in South America, or Mexico in particular. And then we scroll, changing all that good stuff. It just says Indigenous. Indigenous. Okay, Indigenous. Don't say nothing about Afro because you cannot be African descent and Indigenous to Mexico at the same time, especially if you're not going to refer to those other people as Euro-Indigenous or Asian Indigenous, because they don't. No one does that because that would be telling on themselves. But again, you won't find anything to reclassify themselves in South America or Mexico. Anything with the word Afro or African in it. Okay, just scrolling through. So we got for Mexico right here. The National de Pueblo Indigenous. Indigenous. Again. It's not Afro. Okay. In their South America, Indigenous again. South America or Mexico. Your Indigenous status. Oh, I guess Indigenous again. Indigenous join. Indigenous cultural organizations. Again, still no. Still no Afro right here for Mexico. Oversee Indigenous rights and may assess an identity recognition. Mexico recognizes more than 60 indigenous languages and groups. So still no Afro, because if you're Afro, that means you're African. But they don't call themselves Euro-Indigenous, so they would need to lawfully and correctly remove the Afro nonsense. If they've been there the whole dang time. And again, if you do genealogy side by side though, so-called Afro-Indigenous been there longer than the Euro-Indigenous people, and the Euro-Indigenous people will never and have never referred to themselves as Euro-Indigenous. So just remove the Afro. Same with Peru, Colombia, all indigenous, no Afro nonsense, moving on. All right. So changing your American Indian status. If you're from the West Indies, changing one's legal or recognized status to identify as American Indian in the West Indies, when this, oh my, in the West Indies, or elsewhere is a complex process that involves cultural, legal, and institutional considerations. Here's a general guide to navigating such a change of the understand or overstand a legal framework. Research the laws and policies in your specific country in the West Indies. Each country may have different recognition processes or frameworks for indigenous identities. Again, no mention of any Afro, nonsense. So investigate whether there are treaties, agreements, or historical documentation of American Indian heritage in your region. Proof, ancestral heritage, gathered gene. Oh, excuse me. Genealogical records. Excuse me. Family histories or tribal affiliations that prove American Indian ancestry. First step, start with your family. If you run into a roadblock, like most of us have. Hire a genealogist, if applicable. Seek documentation from relevant tribal organizations or records in the Americas that link your ancestry to American Indian lineage. Engage with local authorities or institutions. Contact governmental or Indigenous affairs offices to understand recognition procedures. Some countries may require a formal application or proof of heritage to update your status. Collaborate with Indigenous communities. Reach out to American Indian or Indigenous groups in your region or global. They may provide guidance, advocacy, or official recognition that supports your claim. Engage with cultural programs or heritage organizations that affirm your identity. Petition for recognition. If official recognition is unavailable in your country, you may need to formally petition local authorities or courts to acknowledge your status. Provide evidence and potentially legal representation to strengthen your case. Update legal and personal documents. Once recognized, update identification documents, such as passports, national ID cards, and other records. Ensure your new status is reflected in all official documentation. Promote awareness. Participate in advocacy to increase awareness of American Indian identity in the West Indies. This could also help create pathways for others in similar situations. So if this doesn't pertain to you, it may pertain to other people. So make sure you share, like the video, subscribe. If you're new, get the word out there to people that may be interested. All right. So next up we're going to go over, because we have viewers from Canada with our Indian red, a skin complexion, talking about the people that look like us. All right. That knows that they are not from Africa, and they was trying to make sure that they reclassify themselves back to American Indian. All right. So we can do Canada because we did the USA. We did the South America. We did the West Indies. We're doing Canada. And then we're going to go over to Europe and the United Kingdom. So for Canadians to change your status back to American Indian or reestablish your Indigenous status in Canada, follow these general steps based on the Canadian legal framework for Indigenous identity recognition. Understand eligibility. Determine if you're eligible for Indian status under the Indian Act. Eligibility typically depends on your ancestry genealogy and whether one or both of your parents or grandparents were registered under the Act. Gathering documentation. Collect documents that prove your ancestry, such as birth certificates, family records, or genealogical documents linking you to a registered Indian under the Indian Act. Contact Indigenous Services, Canada or ICS, or ICS. The ISC handles statuses, application, and inquiries. Visit their official website or contact their regional office for guidance on application requirements. Complete the application. If you're eligible, complete the application for registration on the Indian Register and for the Secure Certificate of Indian Status, or CIs, includes supporting documents, such as proof of lineage. For example, family tree, birth records, previous Indian status documentation. If applicable, submit your application. Send your completed application and documents to the appropriate ESC office. Some documents may require certified copies or notarization. Wait for approval. Processing times may vary, but ESC will review your application, verify your eligibility, and notify you of the outcome. Reapply if needed. If application is denied, you can request clarification or appeal the decision. Legal or genealogical support might help in contested cases. Additional notes. If you are affiliated with a specific band or nation, consult their governance office for additional assistance. If your status was revoked or lost due to the historical policies by enfranchisement, okay, paper genocides include evidence of that in your application. That goes for everyone, not just people in Canada. Consider seeking help from legal or advocacy groups specializing in Indigenous rights. All right, so this will be the last one. But make sure you stay tuned. Stay tuned to the end, because we want to make sure we go over how we should be conducting ourselves as American Indians worldwide, globally, internationally, and at home. All right, so how to change your status back to American Indian in Europe or the United Kingdom. Changing one's status to American Indian or reclaiming Indigenous identity in Europe or the United Kingdom involves legal, cultural, and administrative considerations. Below are key steps to explore. Understand legal frameworks. Indigenous identity, being recognized as an American Indian, primarily relies on tribal affiliation or legal documentation from the United States or other jurisdictions. International law. Europe and the UK may not have specific frameworks for American Indian status. However, treaties like the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People can affirm Indigenous identity globally. We did a video. It's in there at the end of this video. It's on the end screen. It's called We Are Not Black. We Are American Indians. And we go over the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, step by step, word for word. So check that. Check out all the videos at the end screen, please. And thank you. Document your ancestry. Gather evidence of your heritage, such as tribal enrollment, lineage records, or DNA testing, if required by tribal laws. We don't normally do DNA testing because they are only specific to the actual tribal group members. And that's like another way they can deny your American Indian identity. If you try to go the tribal route and try to go into their specific tribe, but genealogy will just tell you, you are Indigenous to Canada and not from Africa, and you would just use the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous Peoples, that'll be enough and should be sufficient. You don't need to be in anyone's tribal group if you don't want to, especially if they're trying to pressure you to do a DNA testing. No, don't be doing that, because you're giving your information away, your DNA away. Okay, so, and you can just Google if that's even legit. The DNA testing companies. You can just Google that away and find that out. Secure documents like certificates or tribal enrollments or recognition issued by tribal governments in the U.S. Connect with tribal authorities. If you have ties to a federally or state-recognized tribe, confirm your membership or status through their governance systems. Some tribes right here. Some tribes offer support for members living abroad to ensure recognition and rights. Legal recognition in Europe/the UK. Research their immigration or identity rules of that country. For instance, national and documentation, your American passport or documentations indicating tribal status can be helpful in affirming Indigenous identity, dual status or residency. If you seek dual recognition, for example, Indigenous identity alongside residency or citizenship, consult legal experts specializing in Indigenous or immigration law. Engage in cultural representation. Join American Indian or Indigenous communities in Europe or the UK to strengthen your cultural ties and participate in heritage events. For example, the same people that celebrate their American Indian identity during the carnivals in Europe and throughout the Americas. The same way we can coordinate with wearing our American Indian regalia for Carnival. The same way that goes for everybody. You need to be joining American Indian or Indigenous communities in your area as well, not just for Carnival. Cultural societies and advocacy groups can provide resources and support for reclaiming and practicing identity. Use human rights mechanisms. If facing barriers to recognition, consider reaching out to human rights organizations or legal entities advocating for Indigenous identity and rights. This is on the Standard Form 181, where it talks about tribal affiliation or community attachment real quick. People who ask, what does community attachment mean? Definition: community attachment refers to the emotional bond and sense of belonging that individuals feel towards their community, their American Indian community. This connection influences various aspects of life, including social networks, cultural identity, and overall well-being. That is why we don't need tribal affiliation, because most of the tribes do not look like us. They have replaced us. So that's why we can also use our community attachment, because it is so much reclassification, suppression, systematic oppression, and just paper genocide, reclassification, all of the below. We have to rely on community attachment. Right. All right. So here we come to the end of the video, and we want to make sure that not only do we identify as American Indian, but we need to be acting accordingly. All right. So we asked artificial intelligence to try to break it down for us. And it says, someone who should be representing, their American Indian identity and American Indian ancestors with class, dignity, respect, professionalism, grace, pride, excellence, integrity, core value, service, etc. So we asked, how should someone be representing their American Indian identity and American Indian ancestors with class, dignity, respect, professionalism, grace, pride, excellence, integrity, core values, service, etc.? Okay? A person who represents their American Indian identity and ancestors with class. With class and dignity, respect, professionalism, grace, pride, excellence, integrity, core values, and service. Someone who respects and honors, heritage, actively learns about and preserve cultural traditions, languages. For instance, you can learn about Algonquin. That is one of our languages, our American Indian languages. All right, and history of their ancestors, while ensuring these elements are shared with accuracy and authenticity. Demonstrates leadership, upholds a strong moral compass, and uses their platform or influence to inspire others, particularly within their American Indian community, to take pride in their heritage. Shows professionalism and integrity. Acts with responsibility and honesty in all interactions, not just in public. All right. Ensuring that their actions reflect positively on themselves, their current, their ancestors, and their community. Embodies core values, lives by principles such as honesty, kindness, humility, and respect, which are often central to many American Indian cultural traditions. Serves their community, advocates for the rights, well-being, and representation of American Indian peoples. Ensuring their voices are heard in public, political, and cultural space. Exhibits grace and pride, carries themselves with humility and confidence, always showing pride in their heritage without diminishing others. Strives for excellence, pursues education, personal growth, and professional achievements to not only better themselves, but to set an example and contribute positively to their community. This individual acts as a bridge between honoring the past and building a future that uplifts American Indian identity with strength, authenticity, and resilience. So, we also asked to put it in one word, and the word they came up with was an ambassador. So, we are American Indian ambassadors, and we need to carry ourselves as such. Peace.